Leah Carter chose the flat because it felt like nowhere. Not peaceful, not charming, just absent. The kind of place that didn't hold memories because nothing important ever seemed to happen there. Third floor, narrow corridor, identical doors with identical numbers slightly worn from years of being ignored. Even the air in Ashcombe House felt still in a way that didn't suggest quiet, but rather the absence of disturbance, as if sound itself avoided settling there. The letting agent, Daniel Price, moved too smoothly through the process, his voice precise to the point of discomfort, each word placed like it had been practiced repeatedly. He smiled often, but it never quite matched the timing of his sentences. Leah noticed it, but only faintly, filed away as something odd rather than alarming. Inside the flat, everything was arranged neatly, too neatly, as though someone had studied how a living space should look and recreated it without ever having lived in one. The sofa sat perfectly centered. The kitchen surfaces were bare except for a single mug positioned slightly off-center, as if placed by someone unsure how randomness worked. Leah unpacked slowly, grounding herself in small actions, folding clothes, stacking books, placing objects deliberately. But even then, a strange awareness crept in, a sensation not of being watched exactly, but of being observed in parts, as if something wasn't seeing her as a whole person, only as movements to be understood. When night came, the silence returned stronger, pressing against the walls, settling into corners. Leah stood by the window, catching her reflection in the glass, and for the briefest moment, something felt delayed, not visibly, not enough to prove, but enough to make her step back, her heartbeat sharpening in a way she couldn't explain. Morning didn't bring comfort. If anything, the flat felt more defined in daylight, as though whatever lingered there had adjusted to her presence overnight. Leah moved through her routine carefully, trying to shake off the lingering unease. She placed her keys on the kitchen counter, turned toward the sink, and then heard the soft scrape of movement behind her. Not a fall. Not an impact. Just a subtle shift. When she looked back, the keys hadn't dropped, they had been moved, slightly closer to the edge, positioned at an angle she didn't remember placing them. The detail was so small it bordered on meaningless, yet it carried a weight that pressed into her thoughts. As the day unfolded, more inconsistencies appeared. A cupboard she was certain she had closed hung open just enough to suggest hesitation rather than forgetfulness. A chair was pulled out too far from the table, not in a way someone would sit, but in a way someone might assume sitting required. These weren't random disturbances, they were deliberate but flawed, as though someone had observed her actions earlier and attempted to repeat them later without fully understanding the intention behind them. Leah tested it without meaning to. She paused in the middle of placing a glass down, hesitating mid-motion before finishing the action. Hours later, she found the same glass shifted, placed harder against the surface than necessary, slightly misaligned. It wasn't copying perfectly, it was learning, and the realization settled into her chest with a slow, tightening pressure that refused to release. Reflections became impossible to ignore. At first, it was only a feeling, an instinctive hesitation before looking into any reflective surface. But gradually, it became something more tangible, more undeniable. Leah stood in the bathroom brushing her teeth, watching herself out of habit rather than intent, when she noticed her posture seemed wrong. Her shoulders appeared too rigid, her head tilted at an angle that felt unnatural. The moment she focused on it, the image corrected itself, snapping back into alignment so quickly it almost erased the discrepancy. Almost. The true shift came when she turned away. Just a simple movement, head rotating, eyes leaving the mirror, but something lingered. Not long, not dramatically, but long enough to register. The reflection didn't follow immediately. It paused, just for a fraction of a second, as if it had to process the movement before replicating it. Leah froze, her breath catching halfway between inhale and exhale. Slowly, she turned back. The reflection met her perfectly this time, flawless, immediate. But the damage was done. That delay hadn't been a trick of light or fatigue. It had been hesitation. Correction. Like something behind the surface was actively trying to keep up, adjusting in real time, refining its understanding of how she moved, how she existed. By the third day, the flat no longer felt static. It felt responsive. The earlier mistakes, misplaced objects, imperfect imitations, began to shift into something more controlled, more precise. Leah found herself testing it intentionally now, unable to stop. She altered her movements in small, deliberate ways. Sliding a glass across the table instead of lifting it. Knocking twice on a door before opening it, then pausing longer than necessary. Sitting on the edge of a chair without committing her full weight. Each action felt absurd, but the results weren't. Hours later, echoes of those movements appeared. The glass would be positioned at the end of the table, but pressed too firmly, as if force had been misjudged. The knock would come from inside the wall, dull and slightly off rhythm, as though sound itself had been misunderstood. The chair would be pulled out, positioned exactly where she had sat, but no one occupied it. The mimicry was improving, but it still lacked context. It understood what she did, but not why. That gap created something deeply unsettling, because it meant the process was incomplete, but progressing. And progress implied an end point. Something closer to perfect. Sleep became fragmented, shallow, filled with the constant awareness of movement beyond her bedroom door. Footsteps traced the hallway at irregular intervals, not loud, not urgent, but steady, as if following a pattern only partially understood. Each time Leah held her breath, the sound stopped instantly, not fading or retreating, but ceasing altogether, like a paused recording. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. One night, she forced herself to act. Timing the steps, she waited until they passed her door, then opened it abruptly. The hallway light flickered, not dramatically, just enough to disrupt clarity, and in that flicker, something stood at the far end. It was shaped like a person, but wrong in ways that defied immediate explanation. Its posture was too rigid, joints held at angles that suggested assembly rather than anatomy. Its head tilted slightly too far, correcting itself in a small, jerking motion. It wasn't hiding. It wasn't approaching. It was holding position, as if uncertain what the next step should be. When the light steadied, the figure was gone. But the next morning, Leah found her shoes placed neatly in the hallway, aligned perfectly, except both pointed in directions that made no sense, like someone had understood the need for order but not orientation. The first time Leah heard her own voice outside her body, she didn't react immediately. It came faintly, from the living room, carrying the same tone and cadence she used earlier in the day. But something about it was stretched, uneven. Words lingered too long. Pauses fell in the wrong places. It wasn't an echo, it was a reconstruction. She stood in the kitchen, heart pounding, listening as the voice repeated a simple sentence she had spoken hours before. Each repetition grew slightly smoother, slightly closer to natural. Summoning what little control she had left, Leah spoke aloud, her voice steady despite the tension coiling inside her. "Who's there?" The silence that followed was brief. Then, from the other room, her voice answered. Slower. Careful. Almost correct. The realization struck with crushing clarity. It wasn't communicating. It was practicing. Testing responses. Refining output. The mimicry had moved beyond physical actions. It was learning language, tone, timing. Learning her. And the more it learned, the less space remained between what it was and what it could become. Leaving became the only option, but even that felt uncertain, as though the idea itself had been anticipated. Leah packed quickly, her movements sharp and deliberate, avoiding reflections, ignoring every sound that didn't come directly from her own body. The flat felt different now, not empty, not occupied, but shared. Every step she took felt mirrored by something just out of sync, just behind her. When she reached the front door, her phone vibrated in her hand. A message appeared, from her own number. "You forgot how to leave." The words didn't confuse her. They settled into place with a quiet, devastating clarity. Behind her, something moved, not suddenly, not violently, but with a calm, measured certainty that felt far worse. Leah turned slowly, each motion deliberate, controlled. Standing in the hallway was herself. Not perfectly, but close enough to strip away any comfort of denial. The face was right, the proportions correct, the posture nearly natural. But the eyes lagged, focusing a fraction too late, adjusting in small, precise corrections. The smile formed gradually, stretching slightly too far before settling into something almost believable. Leah stepped back. The thing followed. This time, there was no delay.